Okay, and welcome back. We're going to be doing our third video in this series of the building texture, and this time I want to talk about how we can get some more believable details in here. And the first way that we could do that is to generate an ambient occlusion map. So I'm going to grab this model here and do a file, export selection, and I want to make sure that this is going where it's supposed to be, which I didn't update the change here. So my project should be going to my digital apps and my building texture, and I'm going to have this as an asset, and this is going to be an OBJ. So I'm exporting my house, and that's going to be called, call that house, hit export, and now for my XNormal. So XNormal you can download for free, and I'll provide the link to that in the description here. I'm going to go in here and add a mesh, and this is going to be underneath my same location. It'd be great if this always went to where it needs to be, but we'll easily just get to there by going to my building and underneath my assets. So that's my house. Hit open, and then I'm going to do that again for my low poly. So I have my high and low. They're going to be the same files, and I want this to be under assets. We'll change this under we'll call this source images where everything else is, and we'll call this bakes. So I'm going to make a folder called bakes, and under here I'm going to call this house. So I don't need to tell it house ambient occlusion because it's going to tell that for me. I just need to have that set up. Right now it is set up for an ambient occlusion. The color for it is brown. I'm going to go kind of a blue. Hit close on that. And now I'm going to change that from being a PNG, and let's call it a Targa. And we'll give that again the name of house. And let's hit generate maps. Actually, before we do that, let's make sure this is going to be the same size as our texture that we're currently working on, which is 1024 by 2048 by 2048. Let's hit generate. Okay, this says that, wait a minute, remember that earlier where I freaked out? This guy has some n-gons, and that is exactly where I thought those would be, right across here, because this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can fix this really quick. Multi-cut, click, click, click. I'm gonna hit the Y key to end that last operation, and do that one more time. Click, click, click. Now I know that this is not the same file I'm providing for you guys, but if this happens to you as well, this is an easy way to be able to fix this by just cutting. You'll notice my normals aren't skewing or anything like, or my texture isn't skewing, because that when we add polygons, it's still going to keep the UV set, so nothing's going to be modified. So that's good. Now I'm going to just export this again. So export selection. I'm going to save over that one. Click yes. And now let's see if this works. So I don't even need to update anything. It just knows. Let's see. Maybe it doesn't. Let's re-add that. Okay, and that should also be the same. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, this is still giving me some errors. So this is still telling me that the person who made this file has some n-gons in here. And if I can't find them, press the nuke button. Just go to mesh. We're going to do quadrangulate. And if it still doesn't work, we can do mesh triangulate. And it might make it look ugly, but it will be fine. So let's go to export selection again. House, export selection. And then now let's see if our app will work this time. So let's generate. There it goes. So what that ended up doing for me is it found anything that was beyond a three-sided mesh, and it triangulated it, and that's how we are able to get this file right here. So let this operate a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of time, and we end up getting this. So We're going to close that. And we're going to close. We're going to stop that, close that. Okay, I had a direction map going as well. We only needed the ambient occlusion, so we were able to get that. And if I look inside of my source images, let's go to Bakes, and there's the occlusion. If I double click on that, there it is. Good. So what I can do with this, I'm going to just hit Control A, Control C, Control V. And now that pasted down here, I don't want that down here. I'm going to bring it all the way up to the top underneath the UVs. And I'm going to turn this on to multiply. What did that do for me? Well, that ended up giving me information that I could use to be able to determine where the shadows are. As a matter of fact, if I save this, so File, Save, and I go to Maya, I'm going to click off of that. Notice where the shadows are now. That's not good. Everything else looks pretty good. We got shadows here. We have shadows not good there. You have underneath the spot. Why would I have shadows here and here? Well, that's because I have my roof repeating. And so if I look at my roof for my UV editor, and let me change my background again so it's not black. There we go. So notice, because this, and if I select that one again, those are repeating. That's why I'm getting both of those on both sides. So I really shouldn't be using an ambient occlusion for the top. I can erase that, but I can use it for the awning here, and I can set that to help me move forward in my textures. So that's what I'm going to do. So that was pretty helpful. I recommend doing this early on when you're working. That way you have this baked lighting information. If I use flat lighting, it's even better to tell exactly what the texture is doing for me. So let's jazz this up. Let's make this look better. As a matter of fact, let's look at some fancy houses here and see what they're doing so we can come up with some better ideas. Because right now, if I look at this, this looks disgusting. It just doesn't really look like a good house. So let's try and borrow some ideas from actually real architecture. And one of the things I'm noticing right here, we have stone going across the bottom. That's kind of cool. We have an interesting window. We have, notice the corners. They're not just the siding. It actually goes into this nice white edge molding here. So we can do something like that. We noticed on the corners, we do have a little bit of a awning on that, and there's some shadow. Now I don't need to build this whole bit out, but I can actually give some faked information, something like this, where this sets up a little differently. I also kind of like to borrow from here. I see that there's siding here, but then there's a whole different bit of siding underneath where this angle of the roof happens. So this is all information. Again, you can't make art by living in a bubble. You need to look at things to make things look better. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to borrow from other real life pieces, and I think I'm able to come up with some better stuff because of that. So let's do that. First thing I'm going to do, I took my siding and I ended up adding an effect, and the effect was a color overlay. No longer is this just this really, really boring color that was on there. I added a multiply color overlay, and I have this blue. I could even go a little bit further with the tone of that. You'll notice this may match a little bit better with this. So I'm actually trying to go for a gray blue. So that actually looks a little bit more like the reference I was looking at right there. I'm going to hit OK. Again, that's multiply color overlay right on the photo that I was using. Now above that, I did something like this, which I'm not sure if I'm going to keep. This was a matter of adding a very simple effect, and I'm going to show you guys how we can make that. So what this is doing for me is allowing for me to just push some of the shadows of my siding. I can actually slide that down a little bit, and you can kind of see how that's working. I'm going to turn that off and then turn that on. You can kind of see some shadows pushing more on this. So how could I do that? Well, if I go one above, so I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm just going to end up taking a marquee selection tool and go across one of my siding panels here. Okay, so it's about this big. Now I'm going to take this tool right here, which is my gradient tool, and I want to change that to being, let's just try some basics here. I'm going to open up basics, and here's one that is from blue to transparent. So I'm going to try that one. Again, yours might be different. I'm going to zoom in on this, and so I press the Z key to zoom in, and if you hold down the Alt key, you can zoom out. Now I'm going to take that gradient tool again. I'm going to left click and hold down Shift and drag down. And you'll notice, okay, this gave me a gradient, but it gave me a radial, and that's because I have this one selected right now. If I go to this one, hold down Shift and drag down, this gave me a gradient, but it's like this light blue and then there's nothing. That may look weird until I turn that on to multiply. And all of a sudden you can see that that's changing. The problem is that really wouldn't be what's happening with a shutter or with a siding. It probably would be going from let's start maybe the midway and then go up, something like this. So if I use this and go multiply on that, notice it's really pushing back on the depth of this. However, that may be a little too intense, so I'm going to drop that down a little bit more. Okay, so I ended up really enunciating the depth of this siding. It's only one piece though. So what we can do is I'm going to hold down that V key. I'm going to press the V key, sorry, and I'm in my move tool basically. I'm going to hold down Alt and press the arrow key up, and I'm going to just let go of the Alt key and then move the arrow key until this goes into position of this next piece of siding. I'm going to do that again. So hold down Alt, arrow key up, let go of the Alt key, and then keep moving the arrow key up. Okay, and we'll do this a lot. We're not going to do it forever. I'm only going to do this until I have about maybe this many. Now that I have all of these, you'll notice I have all these copies of layer 4. I'm going to select these by holding down, I'm going to left click on this one, hold down Shift, and then left click on this one. So I have all the layer 4s. Right click, merge layers. It ended up giving me is light blue again. That's because when you merge something, it's going to go to default layer. It's not going to go to the blending that I had. So I'm going to go back to multiply again. And so now, oops, let me just go back to there. I have another copy of these. I'm going to move these down. Hold on. Some glitch in here. Okay, so I can hold down Alt and arrow key down, and now I'm going to hold down Shift and use my mouse and just drag this into the next position that I want. So I can kind of nudge that using my mouse key, and now I've got this. And what this is doing for me is it's basically giving me some additional detail on my siding without having to go super crazy on the technique on that. So pretty easy to do this, and it really does kind of bring out the depth of this. It does end up having some repetition that can happen in certain areas. When we put windows in and things like that, we probably won't see it so much. But this is how I'm going to take all these now, so all layer 4s, and merge these. And now I'm going to again turn that to multiply so I can see what I'm doing again. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift key, arrow key down once, and then again I'm going to hold down Shift and left mouse button. So let's see if we can get that to work again. Shift, oops, hold on, that's the Alt key, arrow key down. Make sure you're out of your blending mode selection. Alt, arrow key down, and then now hold down Shift so you can slide that down with the arrow key faster. So Is it worth it? I think so. You can see some repetition in the shadows occurring on some of these layers, so it's a good idea to try and clean those up. But yeah, this is how we can kind of build up a little bit more depth on our house. And I'm going to merge these layers again, bring this back to multiply, and drop that down. I don't need it to be super, super intense, but here's with it on, and then here's with this off. So it just kind of gives a little bit more depth to this layer. And I'm a little bit off on the layout. There we go. It's a little bit better there. So make sure that this goes all the way up and down. And then from there, the cool part about this is if I hit the Control T, and then if I hold down Shift and left click drag across here, it's going to scale that all the way across. And so now I have this actually repeating across the depth of this entire piece of siding. So I have this in a little bit of a better color for me. I like that. The issue that I'm seeing now is I need to get some more details on this. It's really not looking real in the sense that it's a house. It feels a little bit too flat. One of the things that I want you to be aware of too is when I baked this ambient occlusion, I didn't use a ground plane. And the ground plane is really helpful because when we look at things in the real world, there is a little bit of shadows that will have influence on the edgings of our buildings. And we don't really see that happening right now for our model. You can see that kind of happening here on the base of this. It's getting darker and it's lighter up here. So to be able to fix that, if I build out, not a donut, but if I build this out, so if I put in a plane, and now all I'm going to do here is make sure that this is at the bottom. That's looking good. I'm going to export this plane. So go to File, Export Selection, and I'm going to call this plane. Now that I have that, I'm going to add this to my high definition mesh in XNormal. I'm not going to add it to the low, just the high def. So I'm going to add plane. And what this is doing is it's going to source 2 files now to generate ambient occlusion. And it's going to use that in the low res bake. So if I do this, let's see what this does. All of a sudden, notice there's shadows in the bottom. Extremely helpful because now I have this faked shadow coming from the bottom of this that's going to give me more definition than just the top part. Okay, I've got that, and I'll stop, close, and let's see if we can bring that in now. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and this was underneath my... Be nice if these always went to where they needed to be, but they never ever do. So let's go to my digital applications for the animator and building texture, and that was under source images. So now underneath my bakes, I have my house occlusion. I'm going to open that up again, update it. Now that this is here, Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and we'll go to this layer that was my occlusion. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to hit Control V, move this up. Okay, I should also name this now AM or something like that, or ambient occlusion, or let's not AM, let's say AO, and let's set that as multiply now. Okay, what did this do for me? Well, this ended up giving me my ambient occlusion that is now going across the bottom in a very subtle way, but it's very helpful because now I have a more realistic look to my object. So that's good. Now that I have that, let's look again at our reference. So if we look at that fancy house right here, we have these little pieces and we have some nice windows. So we can build these windows in. It's a very easy thing to do, and we can put those in for those edge pieces by, so I have my door. I'm going to call all this right here. So I'm going to hold down the, I don't need this one, I'm going to delete that. I'm going to hold down the shift key, select this one and select that one. And I'm going to hit Control G, or I can press this button and we'll group that. And we'll call this siding. All right, now I'm going to call this layer trim, and that's going to be above all those. I'm going to go over here, and I want to go about midway. Let's say we're going to go about here. So we're about like this, so both sides are about equal distance. I'm just eyeballing it. We'll go white on this, and I'm going to do an edit fill. Okay, so this is foreground color, that's white, that's good. Okay, now I have this. I want to duplicate this layer. So if I go to duplicate layer by right clicking on that layer, and now it's going to make another one of these, but it's not going to look like it did anything. So if I ended up holding down the shift key, left mouse button dragging, now I have this happening. I'm going to do it again. So whoop, hold down shift, drag over. Now we're in the middle. And I'm going to duplicate that layer again. And hold down shift and drag over. All right, I've got this happening. I want it to look more of like how my door frame looks. So that's actually a very easy thing for me to do. If I go to the door and I go into my rectangle copy, if I right click on this and go to copy layer style, all those things that were done to that door frame that gave that shadow on it and the bevels are going to be able to be applied to these other layers by just going now right clicking, paste layer style, and paste layer style. So if I zoom in on this now, you'll notice there's actually some of a bevel and some shadows occurring on that. So that makes it feel a little bit more like it's part of this house. And so as a good way to check this, I'm going to turn off my UVs. Always make sure you turn these off. Control S, and let's go over here. I'm going to delete this. I don't need it anymore. And now I have siding, and I have these trim pieces added, which is pretty nice. It's starting to look a little bit more like a real house. So next step that I could do here is to add some stone to the facade of this. And so if I again look at reference and look at where how high these go up, it looks like it's going, if this is about maybe a third of the way up, maybe a little bit less than that is where the stone's going. So I ended up already looking at stone, and I found that there is this one right here, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to download that. And when that downloads, I'm going to make sure it goes into, again, my source images. I'm going to put it in the textures. So under texture references, I'm going to just make sure this is going to happen off screen because it's on the other monitor, but I'm just left click dragging that into my folder, and now it's in here. Okay, I'm going to use that. So if I go back to Photoshop, and if I go to File, Open, and if I go into my images, and under here I have this one right here. If I open it, here it is. Control A, Control C. Looks like there's a bit of an error that occurred there. That's fine. I'm going to hit Control V to paste this thing. And we're going to put this underneath our trim. So let's first select all of our trim. Control G to group it. We'll call that trim. And I want that obviously to be underneath the trim, because if we look at our reference, you can see that, well, I guess not in this one right here, but in some of these the trim is it bakes underneath. So I'm going to do that with mine. I think that that's fine. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to move it down. And oh wow, it's big enough to fit underneath here. Now, does that look gigantic? Yes. So what I can do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to line it up to this section right here. Hit Control T, hold down Shift, and drag it just to the point where it gets placed against that side right there. Okay, that still looks pretty tall. So I'm going to move that down. Looks more like what that reference would be. And the colors aren't really all that great. They're kind of, they don't really pop like this. So we'll adjust that. But first I'm actually going to just hold down the Alt key and left mouse drag. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to hold down the Shift key. So that way I'm staying along the horizontal axis. And now that I'm here, I'm going to make sure that the stone actually should not only be underneath the trim, but underneath the door layer. So I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to group them, call that stone, and put that underneath the door layer. Now it's something like this. That's looking a little bit better. Okay. So we're getting this nice look to this piece. If I zoom out, it doesn't really look like it matches with the colors of my reference that I'm currently looking at right here. That's a darker gray. That's absolutely nothing like the house that we were looking at for reference. So how can we get something more like this? This is an easy thing to do. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. And you notice it kind of pulled the colors out of that. I'm going to do that one more time. Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. So what that ended up doing for me, if I go back, I had kind of this moss growing on here. It killed that. So that way I just have some brick. So if I desaturate it, I'm left with something like this. From here, what I can do, I'm going to make a new layer. And again, I'm going to make a selection by marquee selecting all the way over to this side, just about underneath here. I'm going to make a gradient, and this gradient is going to be under basics, making sure it's color to transparency. But this time, if I double click on it, I don't want it to be white. I want it to be, so if I select right here, how about a dark blue? So we'll go like a dark blue like this. Hit OK. Hit OK. I'm going to left click, drag, holding down Shift, down. Okay, that's doing the exact opposite, which tells me that I need to click this button right here. Turn off reverse. So let's do that again. Left click, drag down. Okay. So what did that do for me? Let's do that one more time. There we go. I'm going to turn off my marquee selection so we can see this. It ended up giving me this shadow underneath this ridge, which is kind of nice. But again, I want to turn that to multiply. And all of a sudden, now I have a little bit of depth that's going across the brick. So again, if I turn that one off, here's where I was. And here is where I am. And that was all because I ended up doing a marquee selection across this piece. And I want to make sure that I don't have anything extra, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. All right, and I'm going to just deselect by holding down the Alt key with my marquee selection, just so I can crop out anything else I don't want. There we go. And now what I want to do is maybe add a little bit of a highlight to the top part of this. So I'm going to do, again, a marquee select, or a gradient. I'm going to change this color again by clicking on this. And let's go white. Hit OK. This one will be shadow that we just did. And the one above this, I'm going to make another layer. We'll call that highlight. And this time, if I left click, drag down, you'll notice I have this now. Let me get rid of that. So I dragged out, let me back up one more time. So I have this selected, and I am now using my gradient tool. Left click, drag down, holding on shift, and I have this white. And now if I do that as an overlay, you'll notice that now the top of the bricks are bright versus the bottom. So I really gave this sense of dimensionality to it, which is really nice. I'm going to drop the opacity down on this because it's a little too bright. So you can always tell what you did if you're looking at something you're saying, wait a minute, I can't tell the difference. Left click or left click the eyeball, poke it. You can see if that's actually doing anything. That's doing something nice now. All right, so I have the bricks, and these two bricks can be merged into one. So I'm going to merge these two layers, and I'm going to actually call that something that makes sense. So that's brick. I'm going to do a color overlay. And the color on this, I want kind of a slate gray. And I don't want it to be a lot. I want this to kind of be, let's try overlay. Let's try soft light, might be a little bit better. Okay, this is just a subtle way to add a little bit of color to this. Now, I know if I look at my reference here, there's a bunch of different color on these bricks. There's a couple different tones on there. So if I go back into that color overlay, I'm actually going to bring that darker. And let's try not soft light, but like a hard light or a vivid light. Let's try linear light. That actually looks a lot better. Okay. Now that I have this, let's try and make this appearance. And this is, let me open image in new tab and just zoom in a little bit on that. Okay. You can kind of see different tones on here. And that's an easy thing that we can fake with this. And how I'm going to do that is just open up another layer. We'll call these highlights. And what I'm going to do is grab the marquee selection tool, and I'm going to grab this one, and I'm just going to hit Shift F5 because my current color is white. I'll hit OK. And this time I'm going to do an overlay on that. And okay, that's looking pretty good. If it's a little bit too far off, I can use my eraser, which just press the E key, and we can start to clean up the selection on this. So I have one brick now that's a little bit of a lighter tone, and I can do that again. I can do either the marquee selection, grab another brick, so maybe it's this one right here, Shift F5, enter. And I can knock that back by reducing the opacity on this. That's even better. And I'll just keep doing this. So I can do this for a lot of different bricks. I want to make sure I'm not making a pattern. I just want to make this feel random. And you can see that now we're starting to get this look where they have a different tone to them, which is going to help for the overall feeling this is not the same color or this is digital. Now you might notice right here I have a little bit of some seams. That's an easy thing to fix. If I select the brick layer, I'm going to go into my we're going to go with this one right here. This is our spot healing brush. I'm going to scale that down. I'm going to press that button, and I'm just left clicking on it. What this is doing is it's going to kind of fix some of these little bit of some gaps in these cracks. So as we zoom out, it's less evident that we have these issues that are occurring. Now I know this is a very long brick all of a sudden, but again, if we zoom out, that's really not that big of a deal. So what I'm going to do is go back to my, I'm going to pull this up higher, and I'm going to keep going with my highlights. I'm just going to keep selecting marquee selection, grabbing some of these, and Shift F5, enter, and let's go with this one right here. Shift F5, enter. And maybe this one right here. Okay, so that's good. But I also know that there's some brown and some other colors in there as well. So I'm gonna call this white highlights, or maybe this is just white bricks. And I'm gonna make another layer and we'll call this brown bricks. And we're gonna change the color of this. We're gonna make this maybe something like that. And again, I'm going to make sure this is set to something like overlay. And I'm gonna, again, do the same exact process that I did earlier by Shift F5, hit OK. Again, that's intense. Let's knock that back a little bit. Okay, there's that one. Let me just select across here. Shift F5, OK. And now we're starting to get a little bit more of an organic look to these bricks. Maybe that's a little bit strange for that one to be there. I'm going to leave that alone for now. I could always come back to that and fix it. But we're filling in things to make some less, I guess, we're just breaking up the monotony of the monotonous colors that were going on there. I can even do that to some of these. So the more you do that, the more you change that up, the more it's going to feel organic and more man-made rather than just something you threw at it. And even if we kind of knock that back a little bit, this still looks more realistic than just a solid color because we desaturated that. So that's looking better. All right. Now, if I wanted to make a window, and actually, yeah, let's do a window and then we'll put in a roof on that. So let's do that. So window, pretty easy thing to do. I'm going to close all these things down now so I can actually see a little bit more. And I'm going to make a new layer and group it. So Control G, we'll call this window. And again, look at your reference. There's a window. That looks interesting. Probably don't want it to be solid black where the glass is. If we notice how there's some bounce of colors on that. So we should try to replicate that. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at where a window would be on a image. Because I don't build houses for a living, I build fake houses. So we should probably look at reference. It looks like the windows are about at the same height on average as where the doors are. So again, it doesn't matter if it doesn't correspond directly to my reference, but I'm just trying to see, do windows and doors have the same height for their vertical where they're laying? And it looks like maybe windows would be a little bit higher than that. So what I'm going to do first is, with this layer, I'm going to go a little bit higher than that then. So I'm going to go around here. And this one, I'm going to fill, for now, with a black. So Shift F5. Just gives me an idea of where the spacing of this window will be. Same way as I was working earlier. So I was looking at some of these images. I like this idea. So maybe I'm going to do something like this. And to do that, pretty easy. I'm actually going to duplicate this layer and Control T to scale it. Holding the Shift and Alt key, I'm scaling it up. Sorry, just the Shift. Nope. Okay, I'm doing the Alt key. They changed the command since the last time that we were using this. So, okay, so now I have two of these. Now they're both black, so it's impossible to see what's going on. What I'm going to do is hold down the Control key and click on this layer. Now that I have that layer selected, or the selection of that layer, I'm going to make sure I'm on the one above this, which is that larger one. I'm just going to hit delete. And now if I turn that one off, you can see that I cut a hole in that. So if I back that up, so you guys can see what the heck I did, I have two of these. One of these was a small square, and then I duplicated that square in a new layer, and I ended up, so we could just right click duplicate layer or Control D. And then I ended up scaling that up. And if I Control click on the layer underneath it and then select the layer that's larger than that and hit delete, it will end up poking a hole through there, which is extremely helpful because now I can just do let's go into our door. And again, we're going to select the trim and we're going to select the right click, copy layer style, and we're going to paste layer style on this one. Now it's hard to see it because my color overlay needs to be turned on. So I'm going to go to Effects, Color Overlay, and select white. Okay. So now I have this, and I also have that. Let's adjust this. I'm just going to select the window folder and press the V key to move. I'm going to move that down because it's a little high up. All right. Now let's look at how a window pattern is created on this. I'm actually not going to do this 1, 2, 3. I'm only going to do 2. So I know there's a large middle section, and I know there's actually a inset of wood there, and then it goes in across, and then there's smaller crosses in there. So that's a pretty easy thing for me to do. I am going to duplicate this layer, and that's our large white square. Control T and Alt scale that in. I don't need to do too much, but just enough that that's kind of looking like this. I'm going to put that underneath this one. So now it's inset. All right. Now I need to draw a cross that goes across these pieces. So making a new layer, and we'll just do marquee selection, something like this. And I'm going to do a edit fill. I'm going to change this so it's just 100% white. So just white, hit OK. And now if I use my V key to move, I should be able to find right, see that little purple line? There we go. That's the middle. Now I'm going to duplicate that again. Duplicate this layer. So go to here, right click, duplicate layer, and I'm going to hit Control T. And that's going to give me a transform. I'm going to rotate that. And while I'm rotating this, so I'm on the outside edge of this tool, holding down Shift will snap my rotations. Before I do that though, I need to hold down Shift and then left click. So that way allows me to snap on like 90 degrees and 45 degrees. Scale that up a little bit. So I just held down the Alt key and scaled that up. And now I have something like this. So I have these two pluses. I'm actually going to merge them down. So now I have one plus. It lost all of the, well, it doesn't have any shading data yet. Let me just hit right click, paste layer style on this one, and it's going to remember the layer style that I had copied earlier. And from here, I'm going to take this layer and we'll call this cross. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to move it so it's over here. And I'm going to hit Control T again. Hold down Alt, scale it. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now I know I have some excess. That's pretty easy to get rid of. Marquee selection, just drag, delete, drag, delete. I'm going to make sure this is underneath the larger cross because right now it's poking out from the top. Now it's underneath. All right, we need to make another one. Hold down the Alt key, arrow key down, and Shift, move that over. And Alt key, we're gonna move that over here, and Alt key, arrow key up, and hold down Shift to move it up. And now, just some cleanup. I can see I have a little bit of a spot that's overlapping there. So I'm gonna go marquee selection, delete that, and I'm gonna go this one, marquee selection, delete that. Now I have a window. Now let's address the fact that this window has this reflection that just doesn't exist. It's black, right? So we need to figure out how to do something about that. If we look at a house during the daytime, it's got reflections. Oftentimes it's reflecting the neighborhood or something behind there. So easy thing we could do, if I go to textures and I look up, let me just type in sky. So many different things to choose from. All I'm looking for is just something to break up that so it doesn't look like it's just this flat black color. So what I could use, I'm just going to go, let's say, I could use something like this or that. I'm going to use this one right here. So I click on this. I'm going to download this one. And that wasn't the one I wanted. I wanted this one. All right, so this one right here, I think there's a lot I can do with it. So here's a textures.com field. I'm going to drag that into my texture references. So just left clicking that, dragging it. And now in Photoshop, I'm going to go File, Open, and I'm going to grab this file. Control A, Control C, and Control V. So we have this here, but it's kind of in the wrong spot. We didn't put it underneath everything. So it should be just above the black layer. So there it is. As a matter of fact, if I hold down the Control key, click on that black layer, and then where my sky layer is, if I ended up pressing my mask selection, it's going to apparently freeze my computer. I don't know why that's not. Oh, that's weird. This should allow for me to mask that. So, easy way to do this too. I'm going to move this up a little bit more. Okay, so now this is in here. I'm going to take, let's see. Not sure my add layer mask isn't opening. That should open for you. I've got 3 monitors here and I'm not sure why it's not prompting or anything like that. So we're going to ignore that. I'm actually just going to go back to that layer and select across here, and I'm going to right click and just do create clipping mask, and that'll give me a similar look to it. Now I know that this doesn't look real either. It almost looks like, well, none of you are probably remembering Windows 7 or XP for their backgrounds, but this fake field of fakeness. So what I'm going to do is reduce my opacity on that. And what that's doing for me is just kind of giving me a little bit of reflectivity here, but also making it so, and I can also mess around with the the blending mode on this, so that way it doesn't feel like it's 100% showing up like that. So maybe a difference, and then dropping that down to something like this gives me a little bit more of a simulated look to a window. Now I know when we look at a photo that has a window in it, so if we look at reflected surfaces, it's kind of reflecting in individual chunks. We could take this and then go to filter, and let's do maybe a fragment. So that kind of broke it up. So I think that kind of worked out pretty well. And now we have a window on our fake house that not only does this window exist here, so there's all my layers for the window. I'm going to duplicate it. Right click, duplicate a layer. So duplicate layer, and now hold down Shift and right mouse or right arrow key, and holding down Shift and then continuing to move that over. There's another one, and then again hold down Alt, right arrow key, hold down Shift, move it over. And trying to get some symmetry on this building, I'm going to grab both of these and just kind of move that into position here. Let's hit save. And before we end our video, let's look at what this did. Okay, it's getting there. I gotta adjust more of the stuff on here. But that's starting to look better. The white is way too white. We'll have to adjust that later on too. But let's just add just the basic roof texture on here and end this video. So you might have already seen, I was looking at some roof tiles. I can make this one work. So I'm going to download this one. And now be cognizant of your credits. That is, I think, a monthly allowance. So once you hit, I think it's 20, you like have another month before you can download more. So I'm going to just drag this over into my files. You can't see that it's off screen. I just dragged it in. And now I'm going to open that up. I'm going to also close these. I don't need these open anymore. I'm going to go to File, Open, and grab my roof tiles. I'm going to hit Open. I have this. All right, I can make this work. I'm going to grab these, something like this, Control C, and in here, turning on my UVs, making sure I can see them, Control V, and I'm going to move that underneath UVs. Okay, it looks like that selection was too small. Can I get more? A little bit more. So let's try that one more time. I'm going to go from the top, maybe here, and to there. Let's say that that's what I want. So Control C. I'm going to delete that layer again. Control V. All right, I should be able to work with this one a little bit better. Now I think this is upside down, so I'm going to hit Control T and rotate that while holding down the Shift key so it snaps. I'm going to move this edge in. I'm going to hold down Shift while I'm doing it so I can scale it, and I have something like this now. Okay, let's see what this gave us. I'm going to put that underneath my ambient occlusion too for my roof. So I'm going to hit Control S. And I'm going to go into here. Okay. It's sort of okay. This looks a little bit weird, and I'll apply some changes to that, just like how you were looking at that in our little bit of a highlight on this piece here. But that's starting to shape up. I'm definitely starting to realize I want to have a white trim across the edge here, and I want maybe some wooden shakes or whatever that's called across this spot right here, so it breaks up that flat plane. But this is starting to look more like a textured house. I need to put some brick here. I think what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to recycle these pieces here, but this is exactly where I should be at. And again, the main thing is we're slowly building out pieces that we can copy and paste, and we're using photo references, and we're using our effects to allow for that to happen. So I'm going to save this. And it looks like I already have, because I just looked at it in Photoshop, so that's good. And I will see you guys on the next video.